The structure both from a business point of view, but also from the structure of the piece of writing, right? So we always start with the script. So that's what I try to address a little in video one, is this idea of beginning with the action, beginning with the inciting event. And the responses I've gotten from everyone have been amazing. It's helped me restructure the second half of the class based on your questions so that I can address your questions directly during the class. So thank you so much for that. It's been very encouraging. I've been working hard on this class. And I haven't done a writer's workshop in about a year and a half. This will be my first one. And I think it's going to be the only one for the year. We'll see how it goes and see about next year. So stay tuned for more info on that. But first I'd like to talk to you about getting a script produced, the writing of the script, and development. And I want to talk about Night Catches Us. It's starring Anthony Mackie and Kerry Washington. It's on Netflix. We produced it. It was our first film. And the script, and I'm going to give you a really interesting sort of story of how that script came to us. The writer, director, Tanya Hamilton, had gotten into the Sundance Lab. Sundance Lab folks loved it, so she had people to, by her side, speaking out for her, introducing her to producers. Again and again, people wanted to buy the script and let someone in Hollywood else from a studio direct it. And Tanya was an artist who was convinced that I wrote a love story about a Black Panther and a civil rights attorney in the 80s. I'm going to direct it. I have the vision. And I'm going to pass on these offers for someone else to direct the story I created, because it took me a lot to create it. It was her first feature. She's a Black woman. I'm giving you all the stats. It was not easy, and this script went around the marketplace for about 10 years. But I'm going to tell you the importance of having faith in your work. Tanya hadn't made a major feature film before, but she knew her story was good. She knew she'd gone to school to train, to learn how to do this. She had given it to producers and other fellow writers and gone to many labs to strengthen the writing so that it fit in the Sundance mode of getting produced, right? She knew she wanted to get into Sundance, right? So she knew what her target was. She knew what the work needed to look like, and then she began asking people for help. That is really how it happened. She picked up the phone and she said, "Help me produce this, I don't know how to get it done." And Sundance, somebody at Sundance in the lab who had been reading incarnations of her script for years because she kept submitting, right? Sometimes people submit 6 or 7 times before they get in. She never stopped because she knew that's where she wanted to be. 10 years to the day, someone at Sundance picks up the phone, calls us as Simon says, and says, "I have the script for you." We read it, it was done, decided. We'd never produced anything before. In the same way that that artist who had never made a film before knew nobody else was going to tell her story, we, Ron Simons and I, 2 artists, actors turned producers, who had never made a film before, ever, decided this is a story we want to tell. A love story about a Black Panther and a civil rights attorney. Come on. Right? With Kerry Washington and Anthony Mackie? Come on. Get out of town. We knew we wanted to do it. We didn't know how. And that's why I've decided to teach this course. You don't have to know how it's going to get done. Truly. I do a lot of stuff. I don't know ever how it's going to be successful. But in the trying, in the failing and the falling down and asking people more questions, my enthusiasm and tenacity to learn something becomes infectious. And people start giving me the tools that I need. And I decided when I put together this class that I do this in private coaching, which is mostly the kind of writing coaching that I do, because it's intensive and people have decided I'm going to finish something in 3 months or 6 months. But I know that within a 2-day class, 16-hour class, I can teach you what you need to know based mostly on the questions that you've asked me. And then I'll give you the nuts and bolts. But the one thing that I want to move out of everybody's way is I've never done it before, I can't do it. I don't have any money, I can't do it. I don't have any money. I never have any money. Every time I get money, I put it back in a project, right? Because I'm writing and producing and whatever. I'm being happy. I'm living the life that I have, right? So let's move that "I've never done it before" out of the way, all right? Now, I don't want you to have the experience I had, which was spending 5 years wanting to write a solo show. I mean, I learned producing quicker than I learned writing and producing theater. I learned producing a film quicker, or Broadway quicker, right? Crazy. For 5 years, I walked around with this idea. I wanted to do a show. I wanted it to be political theater. I wanted it to be a story about, activism, and I had no idea how to get there. None. So I started following the work of people who were doing it and asking them questions and sitting and observing. And that's how I ended up doing Exonerated, and I watched them put together a play. 2 writers, Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen, over a year and a half workshopping it. We were in there 2 and 3 times a week eating bagels. I'm always going to talk about the bagels and the orange juice because they are vegetarians and they didn't give us any meat. Okay, I'm just saying. So, but in that process, I learned what structure is, right? I learned how to move language around to tell a story. Because the thing about documentary theater is you're using the exact words of the people, right? But if you're telling the stories of 6 people, you still have to be a writer who can put that together into a rising climactic story. And Exonerated was made into a film, and it ran off Broadway for a year and a half with a rotating cast of Richard Dreyfuss, Gabriel Byrne, Susan Sarandon, Delroy Lindo. It was outrageous. It was amazing. They had never written a play before they wrote The Exonerated, and it was a runaway hit. So I've never done it before. That don't count, right? I have a bunch of clients who had never done it before. Right? Juan Villa wrote his solo show and is now a smoking playwright in Chicago. He took a class with me. He's like, I want to write a solo show, and I'm scared of putting the words of my family out to the public. And I said, get rid of that. Write a monologue. Write it in Spanish. Talk to me in Spanish. Right. Well, a year and a half later, he was doing his show off Broadway. Then he took it to Chicago. He got nominated for a Jeff Award. And now he's been commissioned and doing 3 other plays. He had never done it before either. Right? So what I do is pass on the goodness that was given to me. And I'm cray-cray. I'll ask anybody anything because I am a student of life. I mean, learning, taking in, recreating. That's my thing. It makes me happy. It's my creative juice and it's my life juice, right? And then teaching it to other people. So that I've never done it before, it doesn't count. All right? And I want to talk today about where you want to end up with your screenplay or your play. Decide now. We talked about this in the last video. Decide where you want to be, and that will determine what the writing needs to look like. And then start writing every day. And then start applying to labs all over the place. Just Google writing labs. Start with the small ones that aren't big and sexy. Just so you can get in a room with other writers and read sections out loud. All right? Sign up for my mailing list, and I will send you a list of labs, grants, fellowships. We send them out all the time for writers. Okay? These are the steps. I'm giving you the juice. You're writing. You got the first half done. You probably have the ending done. It's very exciting. Endings are very exciting. Beginnings and endings are very exciting, right? There's always action, right? Right? It's in the middle when your character has to learn about something different and become changed so they get to the end that we get stuck. And here's the point where 2 other things happen. I generally have to decide the name of the play and the characters' names right about now. And if I haven't already written bios about them, where they were born, where their parents were born, what's their level of education, how do they speak, that should have been done a long time ago. Because when you're stuck, you go back to those things to remember who they are and what's most important to those characters. That's the trick about the middle. And the other thing is an amazing thing that Jessica Blank taught me is that often I write things that are about real people. And I use, alternate names for them, synonyms. And I've read lots of things that, when it's, Caitlin Abercrombie is a character, I'm like, oh, that's not a real person. Because names come from a specific environment, right? They come from a set of values. They come from a certain education. They come from a certain country, a region, a religion, right? And they make up who people are because they're so specific, right? So right in the middle of my first play, we were a little lost. I know I was lost. What's next? I knew the scenes that needed to be in there. I didn't know how to craft them. I just was out of story juice. So I said, let's pick names. You pick a name by what is the year of birth of the person, where were they born, where were their parents born, where did they go to school. And then you Google those words. You Google that city, that town, that year, that religion. What were the most popular names in that religion? All right. In the case that you have a real name of a person, then the pseudonym should feel like the real name. Right? I wrote about my dad in my first show. His real name is Bruce. Right? He's from the Bahamas, and his parents were Arawak Indians from Cuba in the Bahamas. Right? Born in the 40s. Mixed race people from these places. And a Scottish last name. Come to find out, I'm descendant from a Scottish sailor. Who knew? Thus Thompson. So I looked at the names that people were giving their children in the Bahamas in the 40s. And I looked for one single syllable like my dad, lots of assonance and those sounds, and we ended up with Saul. Still in the same world. Viable name. Very, sort of educated, Britishy. And it felt right. It never felt like a made-up name. Saul Thompson. That sounds like a real person, right? And in going back to where this character, the character of my father, was from, and where these people went to school, let me see the tablecloth that my great-great-grandmother on my father's side, who I never knew, used, asking questions about that street where he was born. I came to find out what was most important for that character by going back into his biography. And it helped me get to the trouble in the middle of the scene, in the middle of the script. Because what's going on in the middle of the script is the character is being forced to change. What they believe about themselves, what they believe about who they were, all of that's gone now. That's how they become changed. So really what the middle of the script is about is peeling back all the stuff getting in the way of the character. And generally what's getting in the way of the character succeeding is their fatal flaw. And every character has one. Every character has a weakness, an Achilles heel, that is just screwing them up and keeping them from being successful in life. That's what's happening in the middle. The beginning, they got it. It may or may not be working, but they have this thing, and this is their life. And that thing that they believe is their life starts to fall apart by a series of events that you put in the character's path to cause them to act. And because the things that you put in their paths are things that are completely against their value systems they never had to deal with before, they are changed because they have to make a decision about how to deal with these things. And by the end, we see the change and the transformation. What? That's what you do in the middle. You remember, re-remember who your characters are and what makes them breathe, live, and tick. They are real people. I promise you, if you do this, your brain will start popping in the middle. Because really what you're doing is throwing in things to challenge who they say they are up to this point. Try it. It rocks. And it's so exciting to have that moment as a writer. That's what I want you to have. And I can't do it in these 20-minute videos, 15, 20 minutes. I want to do it in a classroom setting. But before I can do that, I need you to keep talking to me about what it is that you need in the class. I will begin to address some of that on the blog, but I will also address it in my syllabus that to date is about 22 pages. Okay, you don't need to know that. I'm not going to give you 22 pages. But it is like the journey I would take folks through in 16 hours. So keep asking the questions. I get an amazing question about, the number of characters or the size of the set and getting produced. When it comes to plays, this is again goes back to what are you making? Who's your target theater? Right? What's their style of work? What did they move to Broadway? If you can answer that, you already know what the size of the play should be. Because you're making work for them. Because you love their work. Right? So your style is like that. That answers your question. right? I hear this thing all the time. People are like, oh, if you put too many characters in, then nobody's going to produce it, and da 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 da. There are shows with 8, 12, 10 people getting produced all the time because that is the stuff of that theater, right? So find your target audience and create something that speaks to them, right? I'm not saying copy the same idea. I'm saying the genre of work. Is this theater political? Are they very humanist? Do they have a religious spin? Is it a very conservative environment and they like well-made plays? Is it an avant-garde theater that likes mixes of music, dance, acting, and singing? Right? That's how you determine how big the set should be, how many words. And in theater, words are the most important thing. The other question I got was copious, this idea of should you have copious character descriptions and stage directions. I love character descriptions that are beautiful and poetic. So, in 2 or 3 sentences, if you can tell me what is at the center of this character's soul, then we're good. In 2 or 3 sentences. That has nothing to do with what they look like. Tall, white man, 6'3", barber. What about his soul? Because what's in his soul, his emotional issues, what stuff is close to him emotionally that sends him off? What is his fatal flaw? When you nail that emotional type in the stage directions, I have all the information that I need. I remember being given a raw transcript during the exonerating with this character. There was no rehearsal, and the director said to me, 1 sentence, and I knew everything about her. She is from the South. She likes to dress nice. And she knows everything about everything. That tells me all I need to know about that character. That's in 1 sentence. So talk to me about the soul, right? And character descriptions. And stage directions, give me only what I need to understand what's going on. Sometimes that may be a lot, sometimes that may be a little. August Wilson has none, right? Lorraine Hansberry has pages and pages, which I love. I think it's cool, So, stage directions for plays, it's what the story demands and only what we need, right? For a screenplay, stage directions are really how is the camera telling this story, right? And you specifically choosing moments for the camera to tell a story instead of you writing it. And the camera can do a lot. A camera can tell us how much money a person has. A camera can tell us if they're a drug addict. The camera can tell us so much. And it's visually exciting, right? The film that we produced, Mother of George, is the cinematography, won Best Cinematography at Sundance because the storytelling is just Bradford's a genius, right? The blues, the deep, rich cobalt blues, when the character is really trying to find some integrity but lost, trying to find peace, right? The blue tells us what we need to know. The reds tell us, the golds tell us about the beauty of the marriage. Let the camera tell the story. So I think that sort of answers all of the questions. So, thank you.